There's no way that this theory doesn't support social activism. It's a choice you ought to make. That's part of how come I think I wanted to create this organization that would use TA in this way, along with other techniques.
Welcome to the Transactional Analysis Podcast, conversations about the theory, application, and spirit of TA. Brought to you in partnership with the United Kingdom Association for Transactional Analysis. Valerie, it's lovely to have you on the podcast with us. Perhaps you could go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your various roles, and we can get into a discussion about TA as well.
Sure. So I'm coming to you today from Edenton, North Carolina, which is where I live in the United States, in the southern part of the United States, which I returned back to this part of the country in 2019, basically. And I grew up about 90 miles from here. Okay. In what was the U.S.'s apartheid, legalized segregation, it was called. And as a young person, I became interested in how do we create equity, to cut through years. Yeah. How do we do that? And as an undergraduate student, I got engaged in a course at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, which brought college students and inmates, youth offenders, who were essentially being imprisoned as adults, as young adults. And our work was to help them understand how they might avoid future incarceration and how they might get out on work and study release. In that context, we learned about I'm okay, you're okay, and ego states. I think I must have been 20. And I was really intrigued by the idea. I was studying psychology at the university. And I got really intrigued with the idea that there's a way to teach psychology or to use psychology that isn't so intellectual and so abstract and so centered on the role of the provider versus the role of the patient, client. Yes. Yeah. So those early reflections led me to want to know more about transactional analysis. And I learned about the Southeast Institute, which is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, still, and they still have a very active program. Over those couple of years, they began exploring and did develop a master's program in clinical psychology, and it was called Psychotherapy and Social Change. I was finishing the university. I had been a student activist, and I was going to go into clinical psychology, and yet it felt very stiff and conservative and unclear about these issues, though there was lots of academic work about challenging racism, right? And understanding prejudice and bias. And so I decided to apply to this master's program at the Southeast Institute, and that's what I did the year after finishing undergrad. I participated in this program, and I was the child in the program. Everybody else was in their 30s and mid-career. And it was, looking back on it, it was really I think in many ways, it was a healing and life-changing experience for me because I saw my power as a young person to actually influence a system like TA, as well as people who were older than I, in the importance of it. From there, I went to work at a historically Black medical school in Tennessee, another southern state. And we were looking at how do we use transactional analysis and other behavioral strategies to help people confront their negative lifestyle choices. So obesity, smoking, drug abuse, et cetera. So we had groups and clients that we worked with there. That was 75 to 79. I was doing that using transactional analysis. And I think what I am aware of is that applying TA to issues where there are power dynamics is just very, very powerful in whatever space. I saw its application, if you think about it from that perspective. Yeah. So the patient-client relationship, that's one up, one down. How do you create equity? That's what contracting is, right? Yeah. In the prison, helping the young men recognize that they have efficacy and they can see themselves not as one down, and these folks in the parole board, for instance, as one up. Yeah. But that they can learn that they can see themselves as equal with different power, and that if they want to have success in getting on with their lives, they need to change things about themselves. And they also, and the system is clearly, we talked a lot about in those early days, how to understand systemic oppression and what's the difference in personal and systemic oppression, for instance.
And that's a really interesting thing, reading about a bit about your background from, all of our guests fill in the form, and I was reading yours, your interest clearly the clinical psychology and the psychotherapy, but then you've got this broad systemic perspective as well. Very much speaks to the TA organizational material. I'm really curious just a little bit about your description as a younger person, a student activist. I love that description. Having been born in the 70s, years later, kind of student activism wasn't so strong when I was at university in the 90s, it seemed. So I'm curious about how that fitted into that perspective you had of being an activist. What drew you to TA through that?
That's a really great question, Matt, because we had a Black student organization. It was called the BSM. I was learning TA, and I invited the leadership of our group to come to parts of a TA 101.
Yeah.
Facilitated by a woman named Josephine Bowen Lewis.
Okay.
Josephine is passed on now, and she was my mentor in TA. It was through her that I learned about TA.
Yeah.
And she worked with our Black student movement leadership group to look at our dynamics, because I was pushing for something, somebody else was pushing for something else. And so she helped us work collaboratively with each other. And we together planned and initiated and took over the administration building in 1972.
Really?
We marched on the building. We stood in front so you couldn't get in. And then they elected me to speak to the chancellor to talk about what our demands were. So we did that. And the chancellor was, and again, because we were doing this with the coaching of this TA therapist, TA facilitator, she was. We were TA facilitator. We were not there with a you're bad or we're good. It was a negotiation. We were negotiating for what we wanted. And I think that the chancellor saw that and didn't kick us out of school. He really tried to listen, and we did some negotiations. And I can't remember all of what that was, but one thing I can remember is that one of our requests was about creating a student center for students of color. Not that other people couldn't come to it, but that focused on the desires of students of color. And that happened over the next couple of years. So I think that it was actually a successful piece. There was another incident. There was a guy who was running for president who was an overt racist in terms of his ideology. And he came to speak on campus, and our Black student organizations protested that also. And I didn't, but a couple of the members of our leadership got arrested and all of that. So it was a 72. It was a complex time there. I also, the Black Panther group was on campus, and we connected with them. So it was a turbulent time. And and Josephine's work with our group, I think, helped us use our righteous anger and also not become a bigot against bigots, which is always the risk in this kind of work. Because being angry, it's right to be. It's unfair, right? It's okay to be angry, and it's really difficult. And that's been a lot of my work too. My dissertation was on differences in intra-racial and interracial anger. How do Black folks respond to white racism? I can talk about it if you want, but the point being that understanding righteous anger as an alternative to violence and as a strategy for change has been a big theme in my life as well.
Okay.
And it came out of that.
I just wanted to come in briefly on something, Valerie, because Byrne was still alive in your early years of TA, right?
1970. That's the year I graduated from high school. So
Okay. So you hadn't actually encountered TA yet then when he passed.
No, I didn't. It was in the second year of college. So 72 years. So he would have passed. But it's interesting because a lot of the people who were in his group, he had this weekly group or something. Do you remember that? A lot of the people who were in that group, I did study with and get to know. Mary Goulding became Mary Goulding and Fanita English. And so I do feel like I was sitting at the feet of all these folks who had been doing all this work on TA. And I was learning from them. And also, I remember I did a workshop on the modern isms, which we developed, which from the TA perspective are looking at, you could think about it as another way of talking about psychological games.
Yeah.
So I made a presentation about that at a conference. And Claude Steiner, did you know his name? Right?
Yeah.
So Claude came, he and I got to know each other because he too was interested in his own way in sexism and maleness and all that. We had several interactions, but that session, he came to the session. He says, I think this is the first time I've learned anything new in TA in a long time. So that was a
That's
nice,
great.
that was a nice stroke for me that he saw that. The other person, did you all know Alan Jacobs? Did you
I
ever
know
hear
the
that name?
name. I know the
Alan
name.
Jacobs was the guy he was another person who brought to TA information about the lasting impact of the Nazis. You know, a lot of his workshops he had a film, pictures, and stories about the Holocaust and all of that. And so in that way, we connected, and I found our styles are so different that in some ways, it was hard to stay in relationship, but I was invested in it. So one thing I did, which is kind of funny, I'm thinking about this, but I haven't thought about this in years. We were both going to present at a conference in Maastricht, Holland.
Yeah.
Maastricht, Holland. And I decided that I was going to ask him to go on a bike ride so that we could get to know each other better in a non-confrontational way. Because we would fight sometimes because I felt like his message was anti-Semitism is worse than racism. Kept saying this is not an either or. I mean, this is about,
it's not a competition.
That's not a competition. Yeah. So that was the thing. So I had invited him to go on this bike ride. He didn't go, but he said he really appreciated it. And our kind of relationship shifted a bit after that.
Yeah, how interesting. How interesting.
That's great.
The reason I asked Valerie about Byrne, was he alive when you first encountered TA, is because I'm really struck, like Matt is, about the student activism piece, because there's a real politicalness to that, right? And one of the things that we've circled around a few times in the podcast, and I've definitely gone around loads of times in my own thinking and interest in TA, is how political is TA? Because, you know, it challenges some of the fundamental thinkings of society. And if something challenges how society operates, then it's political, in my perspective. And of course, about 20 years before Byrne died, he got questioned by the McCartney tribunals and had to swear an oath that TA would never become a political movement. And then 20 years later, you are picking up TA and are a student activist and are using it to, you know, understand the dynamics of your challenges as a Black woman in a university. And I find that so interesting because for me, TA is political. Like it of course it is. And in some ways, I feel that there can be a culture in the TA community to not pick up and run with the power of that sometimes. And I'm curious about your thinking around that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, in preparation for the talk that I gave that you, Matt, heard me at, I went back to a talk that I did at the ITAA, must have been 76 or so. I mean, before it was maybe it was in the 80s. And I challenged them because I did a lot of reading, and there's a story that is coming back to me about Byrne feeling challenged as a student activist came to a workshop, a session. Do you remember a session that he was doing?
Nope.
And was raising questions. And Byrne basically said, we're not political. But he was reflecting on the fact that he felt he understood that I'm okay, you're okay is a statement about just equity. And he couldn't say that we were doing social activism. Yeah. And I remember saying to them that I want to challenge us for the same reason you just said, John.
Yeah.
That there's no way that this theory doesn't support social activism. It's a choice you all are making. And that's what I was speaking about earlier, is that so many of the people in the TA community, in the US TA community, were what we would call liberals, and they weren't particularly interested in the radical change that's going to be necessary to create justice. And that's been a tension. That's why I guess I never really thought about it this way, but that's part of how come I think I wanted to create this organization that would use TA in this way, along with other techniques. And it's funny, in 2019, the Southeast Institute had a conference, and we brought 30 of our trainees to the conference. And of that 30, I'd say 20 were people of color. And it was so beautiful because we filled that room. And I think that it was clear to Van, and at least, and hopefully to others who were organizing, that it really brought a different kind of spice to the meeting, to the session. It was we were doing the TA 101 that ITAA produced. I don't know if you all, it was in the context of that we brought the students so that they could get that experience. And it was fascinating because these are mostly people under 40. And for some of them, it was really engaging. And for others, they found it to be the way we were doing it, the way it was being done. Some of it they found too old school. So it was our process, it was really good because there are a lot of them who would love to become more active in the organizational work. Some of it's about resources. So that's the other thing that I think the TA community in the US has to wrestle with.
Yeah. I'm really taken, and I know we might be going off on a tangent here, but I'm really curious now about the fact that you were so young and as a student and you're getting introduced to these principles. Having trained only in the last 8-9 years, I started my training. The vast majority of the people in the training group are mid to late 30s and beyond. Yes. And I'm just curious what kind of an impact that must have as being a young person and embracing. And you spoke to how that influenced the way in which you engaged with the principal at the college, was it?
Yep.
And how that informed the manner with which you did that contracting or, got your student center. It makes me think, wow, there are so many opportunities that TA has to support change. And obviously this has been your mission. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about your organization. You talked about the Visions Inc.
Yep. We started Visions in 1984.
Yeah. And what was the purpose of that?
Visions is an acronym for Vigorous Interventions in Ongoing Natural Settings.
Okay.
And so it's very much about creating systems that allow individuals, people to be okay, right? Okay. And that it recognizes that we need to look at 4 levels: the personal, which is psychotherapy and growth and change and all that, personal, and then interpersonal, how do we relate? And those are necessary but not sufficient conditions. The institution and the cultural levels have to also be examined and changed. The cultural level we talk about as a fish doesn't know it's in the water. We're not conscious of how the culture is influencing us.
Yeah.
And every organization has a culture, right? And if the culture supports okayness or not okayness or something in the middle. So part of our training program is helping the client, whatever the client group is, understand those 4 levels and how do you identify what are barriers and what's working and what's not working at each of those levels. And so that's a big part of how we do our work. And we also, the other part of it is the cultural level. I don't know how much you all use that in your work, but in organizational work, we invite people to understand cultural differences. And we have these various ways of thinking about those, and invite people to see as a person, where am I? So, because the idea is all of us have multiple cultures so growing up in the United States, even under legalized segregation, I caught a lot of white supremacy culture because that's all there was. And learning a language, English, teaches you a lot about that. That's difficult. So that's an example. And we invite our consultants work with systems to help them identify what are the barriers at the institutional and cultural level that might be impacting how employees can be successful. And I use that, for example, I'm working now with a client who came to me for psychotherapy. And as she's gotten better, I've been working with her now for maybe 8-9 months. And she is now feeling personally really much, much better. And she's aware that she's in a very toxic organization. And so now I'm inviting her to think about how does she use this new power that she has to get what she wants from her boss? And also, how does she begin to understand the culture in which she's working? It just was ironic to me that, because I was seeing this woman for her depression. And I can see how it's in me because I'm listening for all 4 levels all the time. So that's what we teach. And we also, as I had mentioned a little earlier, we developed a theory about how what we call modern oppression plays out. They use the TA framework for talking about modern racism, which is the child-adult contamination, right? Those early decisions that we make about ourselves and others around our difference, cultural difference, before we are 12 and before we have enough information, to understand.
Yeah.
I was talking to another client yesterday who said, we were talking about a local situation that's happening where a white person is trying to tell a Black person how to do Martin Luther King Day. The town has a Martin Luther King Day every year, and it's been going on since the 60s.
Yeah.
And there's a white guy who's now head of the school board who decided that he didn't like what happened this year. And instead of talking to the person who does it, you know what? This is what I mean by modern. He thinks he's doing good. He sent a letter to the paper saying that the person who spoke was a racist because they said that they told the truth about who Donald Trump is. And he didn't like that. He felt that was political. So that wasn't relevant. It's crazy. It was crazy.
How could Martin Luther King Day be anything but political?
Of course, it was crazy. It was crazy. Even as it was in a church and King was a minister. So that crazy thing happened. So this guy got himself on the county commissioners meeting agenda to have the county commissioners vote to have a change in how Martin Luther King Day would happen in this town. No consultation with anybody who does it.
Wow.
So this town, the Black folks in this town, sadly, are a bit oppressed, and that's internal, stopping ourselves, just losing faith and hope. And when this happened at the county commissioners meeting, it was full of Black folks saying, "No, you cannot do this." And there were so many passionate talks and speeches, lots and lots of really powerful stuff. And do you know this guy? When he had his turn, it was as if he heard nothing about none of this, and he continued to put out this idea. So in debriefing this yesterday with a client, she said, "I cannot believe that this guy really didn't hear us." I said, that's what modern racism is. I mean, it's because at a child level, he believes he's right. So he's not open to anything else.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she's in her 40s, so she's young. And she said, when I was growing up here, I didn't know any white people. It was all, it's just like I didn't either until I was, but my dad used to come home talking about things that happened to him at work that were bad, negative to me as a child. So I just thought all white people were bad because of what my dad taught me. And she says, as I was listening to that guy the other night, I realized it's not all white people. She said, "You've taught me, Val, that it ain't all white people." And so we were talking about this guy he caught this racism from his, multi-generation, and he has no real content. But the other thing, and you all will be interested in this, looking at it through the TA lens, when he finished his presentation, there are two Black folks on this county commissioner team who are typically too passive for most of us. One's young and one's older. The older guy spoke to him directly, and he got angry, righteous anger. He said, "Bob," the guy's name is Bob Turner. He said, "Bob, you are speaking about what you do not know. I have never seen this guy use his anger. You are speaking about what you do not know. You did not hear what folks are saying. But let me tell you something." And then he told him two stories about his own negative racial experiences in town. And he said, "It is absolutely not okay with me for you to try to tell Angela, who's the person how to do Martin Luther King Day. You can participate and be part of it, or you can choose to go do your own thing." But that's not appropriate. It was beautiful to see this man. I think it helped a lot of people see him in a different way, which is good for the Black community as well as for white folks who care. To see that the passivity we see is not because people don't care, but it's for other reasons.
I'm really curious about when you say that it's for other reasons. I'm interested in your perspective on what those other reasons are when you talk about the levels, the cultural influence and the organization, systemic. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are that influence that kind of passivity.
Yeah. So one of the things that we know is that, this is also part of TA too, that as children, when we're, running around, seeing the world, learning about the world, children see that some people get treated better than others, right? And one of the things that's powerful for white folks, for instance, is seeing that there was a time when they first experienced seeing racism or any kind of discrimination that they said, "No, I don't like that," right? Similarly, Black folks, when we first see discrimination, we're like, "I don't like that." And we recognize pretty early that I don't have the power to change this, right? So that can lead to an early decision that I'm not okay and that I don't have power.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So I don't have power as an element. I'm not okay. Brilliant.
Yeah. Because element, I can't impact systems.
Yeah. Wow.
And so a lot of the work that we do in Visions that you were asking about is working intraculturally. In an organization, John, a lot of times we create a process that allows for intracultural groups by different variables, people of color, women, GLBT people. We do white people. We invite people in the context of the whole sessions to look at who am I as a cultural being in relationship to my own group, and then how do we work across groups. One of the first corporate experiences I had of that was there was a corporation called the Bell Telephone Company, had a divestiture in the mid-'80s in which they created a company called Bell Communications Research. And we helped to support them in bringing in Chinese nationals, Black folks from, this is in New Jersey, New York area, Black folks from around there, and the white folks who had been in the company all along. And also they had Latino people too. So we had these multiple groups, and our idea was to help the new organization change the culture so that all perspectives on how we solve these research problems get brought in. So just one example is we had a case about a problem that needed to be solved. And so we would ask the Chinese group to see how they would solve it, the Latino group to see how they would solve it, the white group to see how they would solve it, the Asian group to see how they would solve it. And it was a powerful experience of the fact they mostly came to similar decisions, similar outcomes, but very different methods, very different strategies about how they got there. And people got to see that. And that's the kind of stuff that we do, is to try to help people experience how similarities and differences can be both scary, but they can also be exciting, and they can be creative. They can enhance creativity, and they can have each person feel their own efficacy and power.
Yeah. What a great way to invite people to value diversity, like to get a real life experience of how diversity could be a positive thing.
Absolutely.
And it really makes me think as well of, oh my God, that poem, I think it's called Humankind or Human Beings. And it's a Black female poet from America. And she talks about how we are more alike, my friend, than we are unlike.
They were different. Yeah, yes. I know that. Just heard that poem recently. Yeah.
Yeah, it really underscores this idea of that you said that they arrived at similar outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is often the thing with diversity and inclusion, is people get really hung up on difference being a negative, polarizing thing.
Exactly.
And don't realize that actually we're much more alike than we're unalike.
Well, we're all human beings. We all believe all that.
It wasn't Maya Angelou, was it?
Yes.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. And the thing is, the other thing, taking this to another level, part of this is recognizing the differences between ourselves within our group, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We often say there's as much intra-group similarity and difference as there is inter-group similarity and difference.
Yeah.
Right? I think the power is in, as we continue to have cultural and institutional support for creating that kind of culture, that kaleidoscope kind of culture, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think we're going backwards, at least in the United States right now.
Yeah.
They're trying to wipe out, because they say things like, so another part of this, and this is, if we don't understand our history, we're bound to repeat it. You all know that. The U.S. has been pushing people who have been historically excluded for making sure that we tell the whole truth about our history.
Yeah.
You all may see it in this last year since the president has come in, they've been taking away, taking memorials to, Black folks. Yeah. They moved Obama's picture. I mean, your goal is to say, we're going to act as if slavery didn't exist. It's crazy. It's really crazy. Which, I would be curious about if you all think about this, but sometimes I think as a psychologist or a helper, seeing the mental illness that's running our country is really kind of amazing and overwhelming.
When you say that, one of the things that I reflect on a lot in my work as a psychotherapist is the influence of culture and how pervasive it is. I describe it as almost like a radiation field, background noise that we're not even aware of, because you haven't got the instruments to be able to measure it. It's so difficult to know that you're in it. Like you were saying about the fish in the water. Or that someone described it once as smoke in the room. When someone back in the day when they used to smoke in a room, you wouldn't notice it getting foggier and foggier. I was really interested what you said actually about changing culture. And I heard when you were talking about the different groups that you got together to come up with ideas, my curiosity was around how much we can influence culture when we're not in a position of leadership. I'm curious about your thoughts around, because I've trained a little bit with Rosemary Napper, who talks a lot about culture.
Yes,
John
Rosemary,
has
yeah.
as well, and how difficult it is to change in an organization. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that in terms of the larger masses but less power, how much they can influence in comparison to leadership positions in a system. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, leaders are the managers of the culture. So it is important that leadership understand all of this and drive it. And we've been around for so many years. In the beginning, we didn't have access to leadership. So essentially, we took our community organizing and our social activists frame into an organization. And so it was managing up, teaching the folks at the lower end of the organization how to understand their power and their ability to influence.
Okay.
And then supporting them in pushing leadership to do something different. And so I remember one of the early examples that came to my mind as I was saying that is we were working with an organization where they said it was all no people of color, which wasn't true, but that it was right in the town, but in a 100-mile radius, there were lots of people of color, but they didn't, that's another example. We call that avoidance of contact because we don't know each other, we assume, right? Anyway, what we did in that organization was initially we didn't have leaderships. We had leadership's permission to work with them on the issue of bringing in women into the workplace. When we did the focus groups, there were 500 women in this workplace, but they were technical. They were clerical or technical.
Yeah.
But the managers would say, and the lines that, the folks working on the line would say, we have no women here. And of course, they meant we have no women in management.
Wow.
But that impact of that over the years.
That says a lot.
Yeah, it had said a lot. So part of the thing was changing the culture so that they became aware that in fact was a bias and that is creating a chilly climate among the women who are here.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was also creating chilly climate for many of the men who didn't agree with that philosophy.
Yeah.
So again, I think part of the strategy was to hear from them. How are you being negatively impacted by a culture that allows that kind of communication to happen, right?
Right.
And so some of our workshops include inviting people to share an exercise we do called what are the unwritten rules of the game for success in this organization? And then again, breaking them in these smaller groups. What are the rules of the game for men? What are the rules of the game for women? What are the rules of the game for people of color? What are the rules of the game for young people? Various, whatever the issues are in the organization. And it really is powerful because when I'm being impacted negatively by a culture, I know what it is. When the culture is working for me, I don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the people who are historically excluded can tell you what the culture is.
Yeah. It's the resistance that makes you aware.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
And so the thing that we have over the years, what we've noticed is that if we can get the folks with the less power to have the voice to say, here's what is getting in the way. That's one of the ways to open up the discussion about how does this culture need to shift? And so that's one element. And the other element that is really critical is the importance of building authentic relationships across levels, right?
Yeah.
And so many organizations, at least in the US, are still so hierarchical. That's not a given, right? That's not a given.
Yeah.
I'm working with this other company right now where they have a group of about 10 men who are at senior levels of the organization who decided, based on one senior guy, decided we're going to get a group together of men of color and white men, and we're going to meet once a month, and we're going to take off the gloves and be honest with each other and be real. And that group started, I think, 6 years ago, and they asked me to be the honorary facilitator just to keep them honest. And they are amazing now in terms of their ability to say what's working and what's not working. And they would say, I think if you ask them, building authentic relationships across difference around what we agree about and don't agree about, and learning, we use a thing called it's okay to disagree. We have these guys, it's okay to disagree without being disagreeable, and we can still connect. So they've practiced that now for 6 years, and they're and they know that their culture, that they're impacting their organization differently because they take that back.
Wow. takes us all the way back to right at the beginning when you were talking about teaching I'm okay, you're okay to the inmates. Penitentiary. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
When I'm with those folks, I feel so much hope.
Yeah.
And yet, sadly, from my perspective, some of them are leaving because they've finished, they're not going to get promoted there anymore. It's come to the end.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can keep it going. But it's been going for 6 years and it has made a major difference. I just hope they can sustain it.
Yeah.
I really resonate with the idea of enabling oppressed people to understand what oppresses them and what the power dynamics behind that are. It makes so much sense to me that that's a way to empower people, knowledge is power sort of thing.
Yes.
And I'm also curious about your thoughts of how we work with people who do hold the power, who have the privilege, to get them to understand what their privilege affords them, because it feels like coming at it from both angles is helpful, right?
Absolutely.
And there's a whole culture around whiteness, which white people often don't understand, because why would you when it's working in your favor? Like you just said, when things are going well, you don't question it. And it seems to me that's from my perspective as a white man, I've become very interested in that over the recent years, of how understanding my whiteness and the culture that I've been born into.
Yeah.
No one has ever talked to me about that. Why would they?
Yeah.
Right.
Why would they? It works for us white folk. It's great in lots of ways,
Yeah.
And it seems so critical, Valerie, that work is done as well.
Absolutely. In fact, every workshop that we did when we first started, we always worked in biracial teams, and every session included white people working with each other, and people of color working with each other. And whiteness is a construct, right? We all know that, and yet it's such a freaking powerful construct that is real too, right?
Yeah.
And so part of when I talk about the cultural level, I think it's really critical that we understand how that links to whiteness as a cultural ideology.
Yeah.
We have several really powerful stories and powerful material. There's a lot of white people are writing about this and studying this. So there's a lot out there. And the thing is, what's so powerful is having white folks get in groups and begin to talk about what is the cost of whiteness.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
and the cost of just the people of color, but to white people.
To white people. No, that's what I'm saying.
Whiteness hurts
whiteness to white people.
Yeah.
Yes. And the fact is that sometimes privilege blinds white people to that until they get some kind of what they call encounter experience that helps them see something's missing here. Right?
Yeah.
Right? There's something off here.
Makes me think of how the patriarchy can really hurt men.
Yeah.
It really damages men.
It's the same thing. Yes, absolutely.
About that. Yeah, same principle.
I think men die earlier, right?
Yes.
Men go to war historically. I mean, there's a lot of ways. So it's a really important point to see the cost.
Yes.
The cost.
Yeah. What a really helpful point.
Can I give you a quick example?
Of course.
Go for it.
Just another thing that's happening right now. I'm working with a problem that in the organization envisions, and one of the board members who's been trying to support us in this is a well-intentioned person. And I don't know them. I've only met them in the last few months in the context of trying to solve this problem. And when we started, he was not being transparent about what was going on. And at one point I started to feel this, one of the script, we talk about something called dysfunctional rescuing, help that doesn't help, that good white people often are good at. So he was doing that. And at one point I was realizing that I was feeling irritated. And I said, it seems like you think that you have to solve this problem by yourself. Because of whiteness, right? White maleness and maleness. Seems like you feel like you have to solve this by yourself. If this thing goes down wrong, all of us are in it, not just you. And he said, oh no, I don't want to be a white savior. I said, well, check yourself there, brother. That's what you're doing. And the cost of whiteness, he feels like he has to solve this by himself. And in the meantime, he's making much more trouble for us than it would be different if he would just trust, right? I think that one of the ways white supremacy often doesn't allow you to trust people of color.
No.
And, there's a whole lot of talk about it. It's like, because we're different, it means it's not quite as good, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm glad that you see that, because that's critical. If we can get more white people invested in seeing the cost to this for them, I think that would move us
Yeah.
along.
I think the George Floyd moment unfortunately woke a lot of people up. I'm sorry
Yeah.
that it took that to happen for some of us to go, what's going on here? I remember even having conversations with Matt in 2020 after it happened, saying, right, there's some work here that I need to do, and I need to go out and find where I can learn more. And I think a lot of people have started to wake up since that happened. Unfortunately, maybe a little bit too late, but I wanted to go back to something we were talking about a while ago around, we were talking about white culture, and you said it was a construct, Valerie, and then Matt, you talked about the patriarchy as well. So, gender is a construct. I think Byrne, I mean, I'm not a reader, so I'm not 100% sure, but if I've picked up other people who have read accurately, I think Byrne is quoted as saying somewhere in one of his writings that the three quickest ways to script are money, talking, and blood were the three quickest ways to get to somebody's script. And I was just thinking while we were talking that actually that's not a complete way of thinking. In the world we live in right now, gender, sexuality, and race are the three quickest ways to get to script based off the conversation that we're currently having here and the world we live in. I feel like those are the three biggest oppressive constructs that we currently live with in the world. And yeah, it popped into my head about how connected to script everything we're talking about is.
Yeah. How do you see economics, class playing into this?
Yeah, interconnected. Yeah, I mean, don't get me started about how much I hate capitalism, because
yeah, I mean, we could,
I mean,
because I
for
do
me,
think
the root of all evil is capitalism. So,
to me, well, at least oligarchies. I don't know. I mean, it's like, yeah, no, I'm with you.
We're talking about power, aren't we? We're talking about the access to power and how there's no equity with that.
Right.
It's not about meritocracy or about, the sharing. I'm coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning and how you felt like TA had something to say about this. And I guess we're looking at the time, and we're probably going to need to wrap up this conversation, at least hopefully get you back on for another one. But yeah, in terms of what you think TA does have to offer, what we can use within our community, our knowledge, our experience, in order to support this agenda. It's obviously held you for this many years, since 73. You're still in the TA community because it must be still relevant. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that now.
Yeah, I think it still is relevant. I've been thinking a lot myself about, does the U.S. organization or the international organization have the resources and energy to continue to promote it as a model? The other question I have is there some way that we could make explicit the ways in which TA's approaches have been infiltrated into other places? My daughter just got her license as a therapist, and she's getting ready to take this course it's about person-centered. This thing she's getting ready to do. And so I've been talking to her about, let's see, as you're doing that, let's see what you see as links between that and TA. So that's another thought I've been having, is how do we help folks see the links? Having this conversation and seeing y'all's interest, another thought that's been coming to me is maybe it's time to start doing workshops again about something that was about, using psychological process for making social change or something, cultural change.
Yeah.
But that it might be time to frame it in a way that relates to what we're talking about, and then use that as a platform from which to share some of this.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and I sometimes scare myself to say, "Oh, it's old school. Nobody wants to hear it." Blah, blah. But listening to you all, I don't feel differently.
No, I don't think this is old school. This is timeless material, I think.
Yeah,
very human.
I think some of the jargon is old school.
Yeah,
and I think that can be part of the thing that gets in the way when people start talking about rackets and games and things like that. But I think there's ways and language you can use that helps translate it into the 21st century.
Yeah, no, and in fact, the thing that I spoke about, this modernism theory, this framework, it's 5 behaviors that people do from their position of privilege, and then 5 behaviors that we do from our position of lack of privilege. And that those become a dance when in interactions, in a workplace, in a family, wherever it could be. As I consider how to present this, I would use that because it's not specifically to those old school terms.
Yeah.
And it's talking about power imbalances, and yet it's talking about gender and race and class, etc. You can fill in any of the cultural variables to speak about that dynamic.
Yeah.
I think that you're giving me the courage to just keep doing that and to encourage people to see, because though a lot of these new theories are much more focused, I think, on personal and interpersonal change than they are systemic change.
Yes. Yeah, and there are whole sections of TA as well that don't consider systemic change at all. Like, I think the fact that you have enabled your current psychotherapy client to understand that it's not her personal script that has created the experience she's having in her organization, but rather the organizational culture that she's experiencing is so important, because I think psychotherapy, and it would be one of my critiques of psychotherapy, sometimes can be quick to pathologize every experience a person has as their personal script.
Yeah,
and I think that's actually just another way of oppressing people.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's true.
Exactly.
It's all your fault.
Yeah.
So you're
like,
blaming the victim. We call
Oh,
it blaming the victim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you didn't get bullied because you have a certain script. You got bullied because there's a bullying culture in your organization. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think what you've got to say is really relevant, really important. It's fantastic.
I'm resonating with what you just said. That is so true. Again, for people of color, it's really liberating to realize, this isn't about me. It's about what's happening to me.
Yes. Oh, this has been such an enlivening conversation, Valerie. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Loved it.
You're giving me energy to keep doing this.
Good.
I'm glad.
I know we're finishing up and something's just popped into my head. Did you have much contact with Leonard Campos, Valerie?
Leonard, yes. I did know Leonard. I lived in California for I don't know, for a long time, several times. And I did know Leonard. Yes. He also was a person who cared about this and talked about this and worked on this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Initially, when I first came into ITAA, he was one of the people who also I felt was feeling what I was talking about. And we spent time at conferences talking and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Felipe Garcia, who's now retired, and I speak to him pretty much every month, but he also brought this frame.
Okay.
He's really into relationships. His organization was called the Center for Studies in Peace, was very interested in this from the perspective of justice and creating peace.
Wonderful.
He's from South Texas, and Texas is a state that's really difficult. And so the fact that he took that position was also encouraging for me when I first came into TIA.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And what a great name. Felipe Garcia.
It was. Yeah. Felipe Garcia. Very good man. Good man. Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Valerie.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time, sharing your journey, your story. Really
Thank you for asking me. All righty.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a review. Leaving a review allows more people to discover the podcast, so you can scroll down to the ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and click Write a Review. If you haven't already, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts from. We're available on all major podcast platforms. For more information, you can visit our website, www.tapodcast.com, or follow on all the usual social media platforms. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with the United Kingdom Association for Transactional Analysis, the European Association for Transactional Analysis, and our wonderful Patreon supporters.